Imagine sending your daughter to play in a neighborhood, only to look outside and see her tied to a tree, crying while other kids laugh. Now imagine the boy responsible smirking and daring you to call her dad, without knowing her father is a battle-tested Delta Force veteran. What happened next silenced the entire neighborhood and left one HOA Karen wishing she'd kept her mouth shut. You won't believe what I saw that day. It was a warm Saturday afternoon, and like most parents, I let my little girl, Ella, head down to the neighborhood playground. It's just a short walk from our house, safe and always filled with kids, so I never worried too much. But that day, something felt off. From my kitchen window, I caught a glimpse of movement that froze me in place. There she was, my daughter, standing near the big oak tree by the playground, but she wasn't standing freely. Her small wrists were tied tightly with jump ropes, her body pinned against the trunk like she was some kind of joke. Tears streamed down her face. But instead of helping, a group of kids stood around her, laughing, pointing, mocking her like it was the funniest thing in the world. And leading the whole spectacle? Jake, the son of none other than Karen, the woman who ran our HOA like it was her personal kingdom. Jake had the same smug expression as his mother, that look that screamed entitlement. He was older than most of the kids there, stronger too, and clearly the one who had organized this cruel game. My heart pounded in my chest. I slammed the door open and sprinted across the yard, yelling at them to stop. The moment my voice cut through the air, the other kids scattered like startled birds, but Jake just stood there, smirking. I rushed to Ella's side, untying the ropes as quickly as my shaking hands would let me. She collapsed into my arms, her face red from crying, her little body trembling. Holding her close, I felt a wave of anger like I'd never felt before. I turned to Jake, ready to give him a piece of my mind, but before I could even open my mouth, he spoke with pure arrogance. "It's just a game, chill out," he said, shrugging like he hadn't just humiliated a child. Then he smirked even wider and added words that made my stomach drop. "Go ahead, call your dad. Let's see if he does anything." What Jake didn't realize was that Ella's dad, my husband Mark, wasn't the kind of man you wanted to challenge. He wasn't just any dad. He was a Delta Force veteran, and Jake was about to find out exactly what that meant. Before I could even gather myself, I saw Karen marching toward us, her flip-flops smacking against the pavement like a warning bell. She didn't look the least bit worried about what her son had done. Instead, she looked annoyed, like I was a problem for daring to make a scene. "Oh, come on," she said, rolling her eyes the moment she saw Ella crying in my arms. "Boys will be boys." He wasn't hurting her. She needs to toughen up. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My daughter had been tied to a tree, humiliated in front of everyone, and Karen dismissed it like it was a prank on a playground. I stood up, glaring at her. "This isn't a game, Karen." My daughter was terrified. She was crying. Karen folded her arms and gave me that smug smile she was infamous for. "If you can't handle kids playing rough, maybe this neighborhood isn't for you." My jaw dropped. It wasn't just her words. It was the way she said them, dripping with arrogance. Ella clung tighter to me, burying her face in my shoulder. My anger boiled over, and right then I pulled out my phone. I dialed Mark. He answered immediately, his voice calm but sharp as I explained what happened. "Stay put," he said. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. Karen overheard me and snorted. "Oh, please. What's he going to do? Lecture us? Spare me." She let out a sarcastic laugh, tossing her hair back like she had already won. But she had no idea who she was mocking. Mark wasn't just some dad from the block. He was a Delta Force veteran who didn't need to raise his voice to command respect, and he was on his way. 10 minutes later, the sound of a truck pulling up made everyone in the playground turn their heads. Mark stepped out, tall and imposing, but calm, like a storm contained in human form. The moment he walked toward us, the energy around him shifted. People stopped mid-conversation, and even Karen's smirk faltered. Ella's eyes lit up the second she saw him. She ran into his arms, sobbing softly. Mark gently checked her wrist for rope marks, brushing her hair back and kissing her forehead. His presence alone made her feel safe, like nothing in the world could touch her. Then he turned to face Jake and Karen. The air seemed to thicken. His voice was low and steady, but it carried a weight that made heads turn. "Which one of you thought it was funny to tie up my daughter?" Jake's smirk evaporated instantly. He stammered, trying to explain himself. It was just a game." Mark didn't flinch. He stepped closer, his eyes locked on Jake. "Games don't leave my daughter crying," he said, each word deliberate measure, but threatening in its calmness. Karen immediately tried to intervene. "Now hold on. You can't just—" Mark's gaze cut through her words. "Threaten? Lady, this isn't about threats. This is about respect. You let my little girl get hurt, and we wouldn't be having a conversation right now. We'd be dealing with something far worse." The park went silent. Parents who had been watching started whispering, some even nodding in agreement. Mark crouched slightly to be eye level with Jake. "Do you understand what happens when you treat people like objects? When you think cruelty is a joke?" Jake's face paled. His arrogance was gone. For the first time, he realized he was facing someone who would not tolerate his behavior. Not ever. Mark's arrival didn't just change the scene. It changed the entire neighborhood's perception of Karen and her son. Mark crouched slightly to be at eye level with Jake, his voice calm but sharp, carrying the weight of authority that only a trained veteran could project. "Do you understand what happens when you treat someone like they don't matter?" he asked. "When you think tying someone up for fun is a joke?" Jake's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. His bravado had vanished, replaced by fear. I didn't mean—" Mark cut him off gently, but firmly. "Intentions don't erase actions. You humiliated my daughter. You made her feel powerless. That stops now. Do you understand?" Jake nodded quickly, barely able to meet his eyes. The other children, who had been lingering at the edge of the playground, were silent. Even Karen looked uneasy, realizing that her usual tactics wouldn't work here. Mark stood tall, fixing his gaze on her. "And you," he said calmly, "encouraging your son instead of teaching him respect? That stops too. Bullying isn't a lesson, it's a failure of guidance. If you let it slide, it will only grow worse." A few parents who had been quietly watching started murmuring in agreement. The atmosphere shifted completely. Karen's control over the neighborhood, which had always felt absolute, crumbled in an instant. Mark then knelt back down to Ella's level, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "No one has a right to make you feel small," he said softly. "Not ever. And anyone who tries will answer to me first." Ella hugged him tightly, feeling safe and empowered for the first time since the incident began. Mark's calm strength had turned a terrifying moment into a life lesson for Jake, for Karen, and for everyone watching. The message was clear. Cruelty isn't a joke. Disrespect isn't acceptable, and no one, child or adult, gets a free pass when they cross the line. Karen stormed off, dragging Jake by the arm, but her usual confidence was gone. For the first time, she was in control, and everyone in the neighborhood saw it. The power she wielded through fear and intimidation had crumbled in the face of a parent who truly stood up for his child. Ella squeezed her dad's hand tightly, tears still in her eyes, but now they were tears of relief. "Daddy, thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling but full of gratitude. Mark knelt down and looked her in the eyes. "No one ever ties you down, baby girl. Not while I'm here. And no one will ever make you feel small again." His calm, steady presence reassured her more than words could. From that day forward, Jake avoided Ella completely. The other kids, who had once laughed and followed him, started seeing the consequences of cruelty firsthand. Karen tried to reassert herself in the neighborhood, but people no longer feared her. They saw her for what she was, a bully hiding behind entitlement, and they started standing up for themselves and their children. It wasn't just about my daughter anymore. It became a lesson for the entire community. Cruelty doesn't go unnoticed, and standing up for what's right changes everything. Parents started watching their kids more closely. Neighbors became more protective, and the playground, once a place of fear for Ella, became a safe space again. And every time I think back to that terrifying moment, I remember Jake's smug words. "Call your dad." He called him, and he got an answer he and Karen will never forget. So, what do you think? Was Karen's son just being a kid, or was this pure bullying? One thing's for sure. He'll never forget the day he told a little girl to call her dad. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more unbelievable real-life dramas, and don't forget to turn on the bell so you never miss what happens next.